Morning. Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the law enforcement approach to the situation in Nkandla over the past weekend? We've seen hundreds and possibly thousands of people, ostensibly flouting the COVID-19 regulations.
I would say policing is not an easy job. It's a very difficult job because then it requires that at different stages, you as a police officer, you have to understand the situation and act in a manner that is appropriate. Maybe just before I answer your question directly, I think police have learned a lot from what happened in Marikana. They've learned a lot in terms of what happened during this period of the pandemic, where a lot of people lost their lives as a result of overzealous policing. I think the situation in Nkandla required a particular policing approach, but it's a policing approach that needs to be seen to be consistent with the upholding the rule of law and other things that are very important in advancing our democracy. But the policing should not always be about confrontation and using force, because then it leads to unnecessary loss of life, like what we've seen previously. So what comforts me about what happened in Nkandla is that there was no force, there was no confrontation. Police were able to read the situation properly and de-escalate the situation in a manner that protected lives. But that does not mean that policing was not happening. In those kind of situations, police deploy several of their resources. I would imagine in that kind of situation, there were a lot of intelligent operatives that were on the ground, and people can still be arrested, and people will still be arrested. I would believe so, that people will be arrested in Nkandla for violating the law and other things. I mean, we had reports of gunfire being shot, people carrying firearms. And I can tell you that if police had properly deployed intelligence, they did not have to arrest those people there and then. Those people can still be arrested after the effect. And I think for our democracy like ours, it's a very sound and useful policing approach that we should see everywhere, not just in Nkandla, but everywhere, where lives can be protected.
Well, people defying legal COVID-19 restrictions, at what point do you think citizens become a security risk to their own country when they defy these regulations?
Well, it's a cause for concern because remember that the democracy can only stand when people respect the rule of law, right? Mm-hmm. I think that is at the core of stability of any democracy. That the people that are beneficiaries of this democracy are the ones that are supposed to basically respect the rule of law. But the police are in situations like those. They are also called to act with the absolute restraint, because I'm clear that we did not see a recurring of Marikana in Nkandla, because it was a possibility that if they had acted in a manner that was confrontational, a Marikana type of incident would have happened. And in this case, they were able to stand back, but also deploy other assets, deploy other resources, because they've got the capability and the capacity to conduct policing in a manner that is also covert in nature. And I would believe that that was very important given the situation on the ground. I wasn't there in Nkandla, but I would believe that the situation was a bit too tense for them to deploy other assets that we know that are confrontational. And I think the criticism for me would have been that they would have deployed assets to to avoid a situation where people came into that kind of environment carrying firearms, because that situation could have been better handled.
Mr. Masuku, when you say that police needed to study the situation first and then take a certain approach, what approach do you think they should have taken? How do you suggest they would have handled the situation better?
It's exactly what I'm saying, that one of the approaches that police are required to do is to deploy assets that will enable them a better understanding of the situation. So it's a situational analysis. Once they've understood the situation on the ground, then they deploy the appropriate measures to deal with the situation. So what I'm suggesting that in this case, the situation did not warrant the kind of policing that all of us are used to, where police officers with tear gases and rubber bullets, and they go there and deploy those kind of assets. I believe that would not have worked. Would have seen a worse kind of scenario than what you're speaking about. All I'm saying is that police have a responsibility to protect lives.
Okay,
police have a responsibility.
Let's discuss this in layman terms, in much more simpler terms. I mean, you speak of a situational analysis, but put simply, what should the police have done?
Well, what the police should have done would have been to... basically, what I'm saying is that they should have understood the situation in a manner that allowed them to deploy appropriate policing approach. And I'm saying there is no one policing approach that they should deploy, which is basically confrontational and using force. But I'm saying in this instance, their policing approach was based purely on the situation on the ground, and they were able to deploy assets. The issue of arresting people, it's an issue that I think would be very interesting to see how many people that were in that environment would be arrested, because it's very important for the rule of law. It's very important for this era, particularly in the era of COVID, that regulations are respected, and everybody needs to be seen to be respecting those. But all I'm saying is that in this situation, I think I applaud the police for kind of the policing approach that they did, because it was one that we're not used to, but it was one that was very useful given the situation that they were confronted with.
Now, Mr. Masuku, earlier on you said that the police, after due investigation has been carried out, they still can arrest those found to be on the wrong side of the of the disaster management laws. My understanding of that statement is that the police should have been reactionary more than proactive, and we are dealing with a pandemic here, Mr. Masuku. We're not dealing with a crime wherein something can be recovered after the fact. I mean, the transmission of person to person, I mean, the person to person transmission of the COVID-19 happens instantly, and there's no recovery after that. And God forbid, people may die.
I was cut. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear the question that you asked. I apologize for that.
Okay, you said that.
Would you like to repeat that question again?
Yes, certainly. You said that people. I mean, the police, after due investigations has been carried out, they can still arrest those perpetrators, the perpetrators or the flouters of the COVID-19 lockdown regulations. And I'm saying to you, are you suggesting that the police should have been reactionary more than proactive in analyzing the situation? Because we're dealing with a pandemic here wherein the transmission of the virus happens instantly. It's not like a criminal offense which can be remedied at a later stage. Mr. Masuku, still with us? Okay, we have lost Themba Masuku there. He's the program manager at the African Policing Civilian Oversight Forum. Well, this forum, as I've mentioned earlier, is a non-profit trust, and their work includes working on issues of police accountability and governance in Africa. He was just reflecting on the visuals that we saw yesterday coming out of Nkandla, wherein hundreds of people and supporters of former President Jacob Zuma and as well as ANC, were flouted regulations of the COVID-19. All right, this is the agenda on SABC News. It is 3 minutes to 10.